All right, everybody out there in the internet land, especially attention to the Jump Seat Nation. It's Friday, 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 Friday. So last week we had a awesome video produced by my new friend Lars from Sweden about fire behavior. Man, I tell you what, I learned a lot from that fire behavior video, Lars. And I told him that, man, maybe next Friday that I'll whip a little bit of the hoarding version out. Well, I'm here in the Jump Seat Studios, and I'm getting final preparations for tomorrow's class in Darby Township, Pennsylvania. Traveling out to share all of the new exciting research and some of the old stuff that I have. And I thought I'd want to share a little insight on some insight on fighting hoarding fires, or specifically heavy content environment fires. And one of the biggest questions I get is, Ryan, can we go inside a hoarding condition safely? My answer is always, it depends. There's a lot of variables that need to be considered when you're tasked with entering a hoarding environment. And one of the biggest variables you need to be weighing is the risk versus reward, because there's going to be more complex situations. It's going to be a more dangerous situation, and you're going to be probably test to your limits. So we need to really evaluate the risk versus reward assessment tool. So is the risk going to be worth the reward? Do we have a known savable life? Do we have potential victims trapped? Do we have a small manageable fire? These are all some of the variables that need to come into play. But seeing how that it is Fire Behavior Friday, let's talk about fire behavior specifically in the heavy content environment. So with that being said, this is a video that I use in my class. I'll go ahead and make this full screen. This video is from Shepherdstown, West Virginia, and this is a lot of good learning going on here from the Shepherdstown, West Virginia Fire Department. Number one, this fire happened during the day to make things more challenging than what you see on. Let me stop this real quick. What makes this fire even more complex is that the water system was, I think, almost inoperable or not working to capacity at the time of this fire. So huge shout out to the Shepherdstown Fire Department for telling stories about this one and sharing their experience. This came in with possible victims trapped, unaccounted for occupants. And right away, you can see from the screen here of the assessment tools and access issues that they have. These are large storage containers full of bins that have little shelters over them. And just like I tell all my students in the classes that I teach, look for the blue tarps. Hashtag blue tarp is consistent with each one of these hoarding videos that I show. And most of the pictures I have, there's always one common thing in each of them, and it's a blue tarp. So this came in during the day. They had an inoperable or insufficient water supply, so they immediately ordered a tanker task force. Now, there's some cues and clues about fire dynamics in relation to this house. Number one, are we dealing with a ventilation limited fire or fuel restricted fire? Well, we can probably take the fuel and put it, it's got plenty of fuel. Are we really dealing with a ventilation limited principle? Well, it depends. Are you looking here at the first floor where we've got obvious fire venting out of, this is actually side C. C and D corners. We've got pockets of venting fire. But as the camera pans up here just in a few minutes, you'll see that we've got a ventilation limited conditions on the second floor. Primarily, this is where the Shepherdstown Fire Department decided to do their vent inner search technique. So reading the fire conditions, we've got ventilation limited conditions on the top. We've got self-venting fire conditions on the bottom. These are some dangerous combinations, as if that self-venting fire reaches the gases up on top, they can light off, causing a rapid fire phenomenon such as a flashover or a backdraft. But Shepherdstown did a real good job with coordinating the efforts. They've got a hose line in place. You can see you start the water application on the first floor, and the second floor uses a pretty unique approach to gaining access to the second floor. Is they use the scaffolding that's in place that the occupant uses. Long story. Tell you about that later. So now we're getting a pretty good fire suppression knockdown on the first floor, but they're getting ready to progress up to the second floor to do the VEIS. Now, one thing that we learned during the Kill a Flashover 2015 is when we do this procedure in heavy content conditions, we need to automatically assume that we cannot close the interior door because of the amount of clutter. Now, Why did Shepherdstown choose this part of the building? Well, they knew from multiple EMS calls that if there was an occupant in there, this was going to be the only place that they would be savable and salvageable at this point during the operation. So you can see we've got some good steam conversion. We're doing a simultaneous attack here. But we also got to consider about these gases that are being stored up in here. And these gases, these gases up top, are they within their flammable range? Are they outside their flammable range? And that's something we need to consider. It goes on, the video goes on to show you that they clear the window seal, let the room lift. They commit one firefighter to a VEIS without the I because we need to automatically assume that. And they clear the room, they get out, and they go to a defensive operation. But reading the smoke tells us that either it's too lean, too rich. We do the Dave Dotson smoke, color, density, and velocity. It's going to tell us that. Now, so for our behavior Friday, what would be the one variable that we would want to control in this situation? Now, if we talk about the fire tetrahedron, we got the heat, it's on fire. We got plenty of fuel, it's a heavy content fire. What's the one variable we need to take into huge consideration for fire behavior and to reduce the risks the firefighters are taking? And that's the airflow. How much air does it have? Does it have where's the intakes? Where's the exhaust at? How can we manage the airflow to keep it restricted so that way we can keep our firefighters safer as they work in either a dead airspace or a unidirectional flow going away from them? Well, that's some things that we need to consider, or you need to consider during your risk versus reward analysis if you choose to enter the heavy content environment. Because we don't want to go working into a bidirectional flow, especially if you're searching without a hose line. So we want to reduce the amount of bidirectional flows in there. How do we control the flow? Well, number one, shut the front door, right? Hey, Ryan, shut the front door. Yeah, well, that is a possibility, and that is a good possibility in there. But to really add another layer of safety, something that the Kill a Flashover folks introduced me to that I've kind of really taken interest in, where's it at, is hanging our smoke curtains or smoke blockades. So this is something that I'm actually doing some research on, and the folks here in my area are doing, and that is introducing a smoke blockade in there. And the reason for a smoke blockade is number one, the firefighters feel safer going into there, and because if something goes wrong, the door won't latch, it won't pinch off your hose. You can see here we've got 10 centimeters from the floor. Dr. Wright, thank you, Dr. Wright, for sharing some of your information with me. But this is during the Kill a Flashover. So we put the smoke curtain, we create a blockade here, so that way the overpressure side stops. The pressure builds up behind the curtain, redirects, and finds the other way out, which at this point we had an exhaust vent on the opposite side. So we're restricting the airflow. We're choking the fire down, so that way we keep it smaller, longer. Now, another big concern about all of this, if you choose to go into a hoarding condition, is the shielding effects of the horde. So what you're seeing now is a screenshot of a soon-to-be released video from Kill the Flashover 2015. You see the firefighter here. You can see the shielding effects that this is our simulated hoarding conditions made. Behind this is normal combustible stuff. We put these pallets up to keep the stuff out so the firefighters wouldn't get entangled. We've got some normal VHS tapes over here, but you can see the superheated gases. How hot are they? If we read our pilot, 300-400 degrees. How hot is this firefighter? Well, our spot temperature is only 203. And they're actually a couple of inches behind there. Now, what was really interesting about this fire dynamic model, as far as the heavy content was, is these firefighters. This is my good captain Davey there. Davey volunteered to go first, which was awesome because we didn't. Well, we pretty much knew what was happening. We just still had some variables we weren't considering. He said he felt zero heat until he turned this corner, and then he felt the radiant heat from the fire coming out of the room. Why is that? Well, couple different theories. There's a lot of mass here. This is like the biggest log on the campfire, absorbing the heat. But it also has a direct shielding effect because the gases stay high. This will be your overpressure side. This will be your underpressure side. And this is your neutral plane. So he's well under the neutral plane, under that 48-inch mark. And he also has these stacks of crap shielding them from the heat. Now, two key things here. Number one, is this a environment we should be going into? I can't make that decision for you. But making this decision, I'll throw some variables at you. But imagine if we've got possible entrapment, or if we've got a confirmed victim trapped in the hoarding situation. Most likely, where are they going to be at? You think they're going to be up here on top of their stuff, or you think they're going to be in a pathway, most likely going towards an exit for escape if anything happened. Most likely they're going to be down here. And my good buddy Andy Starn said that's why we need to use our thermal imaging cameras to find the coldest spot. We know the overpressure side is going to be the hottest. Where's the coldest spot? You can use your thermal imaging camera to identify these pathways in more cluttered conditions. Now, this is not extreme cluttered conditions because we try to make it just as safe as for our firefighters as possible. If you can imagine this is an uncontrolled clutter, we would use it to spot the coldest area. That way, this is where you would want to search. You want to stay in these pathways and when you're accessing the fire. Imagine if you were to go crawling over these stacks of debris to make entry into these fires. Number one, we don't know how stable these things are. Number two, how much hotter are you going to be? So now you've went from a spot temperature of 145, floor temperature below that, to temperatures in the range, where were we at? 380, 400, almost 500 up this part. That is pushing the limits of your PPE, and probably your mask will fail. That's another reason why we want to use the pathways, use the shielding effect to our advantage, and we don't want to crawl over this stuff. So, Ryan, what are some variables I need to consider before crawling into a heavy content environment? Number one, is there controlled ventilation? Meaning, is all the windows in place? Is the doors can be closed? Can we hang a smoke curtain to control it? Number two, where's the fire at and where's the fire going? Well, we know the fire is if we go back to our video here from Shepherdstown, the video appears that the bulk of the fire is on level 1. We know that's where the fire is at. Now that we've opened these vents, we've created a flow from the bottom to the top. It's more than likely going to draw the fire out. That should be okay, as they're suppressing this flames on the first. So the fire's on the first floor. Should we put water on the fire before we search this? This is what your critical thinking need to come into play. Is it best to put water on the fire and put the fire out, or is it best to go search without doing it? Well, that's going to be up to you and using your decision-making model when you're approached with these conditions. So, is it going to be best to do a direct attack or an indirect attack? Just keep in mind that these are both options. They're both in your toolbox. And remember that hoarding situations are going to require you to use more air, use more SCBA air. It's going to be tactically harder, and you may not be able to reach the seat of the fire. So a decision-making model should come from a good tactical 360 with your thermal imaging camera, and then choose, should we hit the fire, knock it down, or should we go inside to make the rescue? Now, something we're surprised about is when they did not hit it down from the outside, there was no real steam production down here because the victim was shielded from the heat, shielded from the byproducts because of this stuff. Number one is they applied it right. They didn't over-apply. They killed it from the outside using under pressure attack, and we'll explain that one later. But even if you were to shoot it at the ceiling and give it some quick burst, by not over-applying water keeps that neutral plane in place. The victim is shielded from the heat, from the radiant heat, from this belongings, and actually they could survive longer. So for Fire Behavior Friday, I might have rambled a little bit. Lars, this is your fault. Your fault. You got my mind swimming. Number one, heavy content environments, high risk. Make sure it's high reward. Heavy content environments produce a firefighter trap, in my opinion. That's the trap zone right here. Because if you don't control the air, if you don't take into consideration the fire growth and fire spread, Fire Behavior Friday, and you get in these situations and you don't start flowing water, you're going to be lulled into a false sense of security when you're experiencing temperatures of only around 115 to 120, thinking you're perfectly safe, and all of a sudden you turn this corner and you're faced with a 500-degree nightmare. So take that in consideration. If you do go into a heavy content environment, keep in mind the shielding effects of the horde. All right, that's it. I hope I didn't ramble too much. I got plenty of stuff to do before my flight to Philadelphia tonight. If you guys are in the Philadelphia area, check us out tomorrow, Darby Township. I think it's Sharon, Pennsylvania. Looking forward to seeing you guys out on the road somewhere. Have a great weekend, Jump Seat Nation. Stay safe.